Okay, we'll call back to order, and we are seriously 1 hour behind in terms of our agenda, so please, let's move forward with that in mind. Item 2.04, School Leadership Development, Dr. King.
Chairman Houston, members of the board, 2.04 School Leadership Development will be an update of the technical assistance visit to be presented by Dr. Williford. Dr. Williford. 5 minutes. Go right ahead.
Dr. Houston, members of the board, Dr. King, thank y'all for having me back again. Just want to give
Delighted to have you back.
Great. Just want to give you an update on the memorandum of understanding. Specifically, we've had 2 visits to Richmond over the month of January, and we went last on January 29th to have the collaborative meeting with the Office of School Improvement. And so as part of the memorandum of understanding, you may recall there were actions that the VDOE would take responsibility for. And part of the responsibility was to conduct technical assistant visits to our first-time denied schools. And so I provided you with dates, I want to say back in January. Due to the snow or inclement weather from Richmond to Norfolk, we had an interruption in those services that they would provide. But earlier today, we did finish the technical assistance visits for all of our schools. And so I provided you with the dates and the areas that they came to essentially give us an audit of our curriculum, instruction, and observations of some classrooms in terms of looking for effective teaching practices. From these visits, we anticipate that we will receive additional recommendations or essential actions to add to our corrective action plans. We did some of that work in Richmond on the 29th, while I would say wordsmithing and working on the essential actions that were presented to you and then to the Office of School Improvement. We expect to get more recommendations that will align specifically to various content areas in which those schools are warned or where the accreditation is denied. And so we will have a VDOE teleconference later this month to receive the recommendations. So during the meeting on the 29th, we weren't able to receive those recommendations because the technical assistant visits were not complete at that time. And so once we have that teleconference, we'll finalize the essential actions and then we'll be ready to move forward. I also wanted to note, per the memorandum of understanding, that we submitted the quarterly data analysis forms for Q1 for each school where accreditation had been denied. And so at this time, I would just like to open up for questions if you have any questions in reference to the MOU update.
Since many of my friends watch these broadcasts, MOU is a generic term that can apply to many memorandums of understanding. In this particular memorandum of understanding, it's between the Virginia Department of Education and Norfolk Public Schools. And just for clarity, so they know what we're talking about, for what purpose?
The memorandum of understanding between the Virginia Board of Education, Norfolk Public Schools, and our schools in reference to their accreditation being denied in the first year.
The various schools.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Item 2.05, School Board Development, Strategic Plan Goals, Dr. King.
Chairman Houston, members of the board, 2.05 School Board Development, Strategic Plan Goals. I will remind the board that you received a draft of in the form of information around strategies and action steps last work session to review. So this is a good segue from the information that was presented from Dr. Williford, because there, in terms of the MOU and the work that the board does to support student achievement, there is an item that references professional development for the board to support the school division in moving student achievement forward. And that information, of course, was submitted to the state in the form of what our partnership represents as a governance leadership team partnership with Virginia School Boards Association, as well as National School Boards Association and the Council of Urban Boards of Ed. And so they have that information. They also have copies of the previous agendas with the student achievement items highlighted. So, long story short, those items in terms of the professional development plan have been accepted and to meet the requirement. However, this appears for a number of reasons, one being that we all feel that that should be a fluid process. So in terms of reviewing what you received earlier around the steps and the strategies, it's time to consider updating that in the way that the board decides. That doesn't mean that you do it today. However, as we move forward, there will be other meetings that will be planned by the board. So it would have implications for your interest around agenda items that would continue to link to supporting student achievement and the role of the board in supporting student achievement and all of those things. And so the document is there for you so that you can make notes and think of suggestions of change for some of those strategies and action steps, because what you have within the documents that you received last month, it centers on what was required by the state to secure Board of Distinction, in addition to all of the national standards around boards of distinction, which would include the student achievement piece, and that's why we were able to quickly meet that. However, I would suggest to the board that we can begin to take that to the next level by looking at where we are, going back and modifying what we have, updating that, and think about what the implications are for future agenda items for our governance leadership team training. And so now it's, that time is upon us to have that discussion about that partnership.
So 2.5 years ago, when you started as our superintendent and CEO, you very wisely led us to the strategic planning process. Of course, as a part of the desire for us to become a board of distinction, which at that time was certainly not a practice or concept in Virginia, not at least in that terminology, and in conjunction with our part of the strategic plan as it relates to our professional development, we embraced these 4 goals. And as you just mentioned, this is a good time for us to review the goals along with the action steps and targets, and determine whether or not we want to maintain the goals as they are or make some adjustments. 2 things I would add quickly and briefly. Of course, the goal number 3, the governance leadership team engages in systematic improvement. As you mentioned, we've formulated that partnership 2 years ago with VSBA, Cube/NSBA, and I think we've made great progress in the utilization of that partnership as we discuss this, or at least consider this matter for perhaps meetings for March or April, as we determine going into the summer what our goals will be related to board professional development. I would just let us know here, and we'll be talking about our budget, the school board's budget, in just a little bit, that Ms. Gina Patterson, Executive Director of VSBA, has proposed a contract for continuing the development. I'll make that available for our consideration, and but I will make it known now that there's no additional cost, no increase in the proposed cost of the training. And so as we talk about this, just know that they are interested in continuing with us, has sent us a proposed contract for consideration, and I think this is the right time of the year for it, as we move into both budget planning and looking at our strategic plan, and no increase in cost. Any questions or comments on the goals? So is there a feeling that, just based on what you see here, that we may want to get it on the agenda in the next month or two to modify it in some way, moving towards the summer and our work towards the third year of the strategic plan? So that we'll know in our planning whether or not we want to make sure that it's on another agenda.
Can I make a recommendation, perhaps, that we, by email Dr. Houston?
Okay.
And CC all of us with your recommendations from this document so that we can take time offline to look at it?
Mhm.
And then reflect and then come back perhaps at the next working session in March, discuss all that we have recommended together, and then we can then at the next formal perhaps adopt what our goals would be, should they be
Mhm.
different from here? And that would be the process we could use moving forward.
In the meantime, I will send you the, it's a contract offer, but that's what it is, for continuing the board governance training, so that we can get feedback as to if we want to continue, and if so, what we want to do. Okay?
So are we comfortable moving forward in that approach? Okay.
Just one minor caveat. Comfortable in continuing the relationship with VSBA, definitely. Regarding our the retreat for the next board in July of 2015, I really think there needs to be rethought how the time is spent. And I can elaborate that individually, but I'm not sure the time spent in the way that it has been spent would be best for this next year.
Okay.
But as far as a relationship with the school board and everything else, and just as an aside, Dr. King, predicting that since people judge school systems and teachers on test scores only, high-stakes tests, I predict beginning to see the uptick in those scores this coming year, and you might want to prepare to have a presentation on the role of professional development in that kind of progress for the next year's cube.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'll facilitate that correspondence.
Say it again.
If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and email the board to facilitate the goal setting.
Okay.
Okay.
Good enough.
I'd just like to reiterate just one point of order on the page 2 of the document, is that Dr. Gabriel and myself attended the challenging, the task force on schools in challenging environments, and I was also at the VSBA annual convention, so I want to make sure that was noted.
Email to know what our update.
Okay. All right, did you get that, Janelle? We didn't receive the written report from what you all learned. I think that was the discrepancy.
The dog
There was
ate. My dog ate.
no submission. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 2.06, Policy Committee, Mr. Jordan and Dr. Birdsong.
Good afternoon, Dr. Houston, Mrs. Doyle, members of the board, Dr. King. The Policy Review Committee, the School Board Policy Review Committee met on January the 16th. At that time, we did not have any new policies to review. However, there were some policies that came up for discussion. Policy KKA, Service Animals in Public Schools, Mrs. James Mitchell, our Special Education Director, Senior Director, was asked to go back to SEAC to get some input regarding that policy, and so she was able to do that, and that is the reason you have that policy in your packets today for your review and for feedback or questions if you have any. In addition to that, it's been quite some time in the making, but we have finally presented to you our social media policy, which is policy GAZA, and it is accompanied by the employee conduct policy, policy GAZ, and so we will be presenting that to you today. Dr. Myers-Dobb, along with Mrs. Mather and the cabinet, have worked very hard. And of course, Mr. Cloud has been there every step of the way with helping us with developing this policy. So these two policies are new policies. So if you have any questions about those policies, we'll be more than happy to address your questions, comments, or concerns.
Yes.
All of these policies generally have been sifted and screened by VSBA first, right?
Dr. Stewart, at this time, the VSBA does not have a model social media policy. That's why we had to
So
develop
this
our
is
own
totally
policy.
ours.
It is totally our policy.
Got it.
Just to further clarify, I believe you also went to other divisions to get their input. So this
Yes,
is
we
not-
did.
So can you just describe that so that people have the benefit in the community of understanding how this came to be?
Absolutely. In fact, again, we've been working on this policy for quite some time. We've done some collaboration with Virginia Beach schools. Mr. Cloud has researched a number of school divisions. I know Virginia Beach in particular because they're close by, and we aligned our policy closely to theirs. And if, Mr. Cloud, if you want to add some other districts you kind of did some research with.
Arlington, I think Alexandria, mostly to Virginia. The reality is that most divisions seem to have now or are in the process of developing a social media policy. I'm not sure, it's very tricky to write because of the First Amendment, and I think that may be why the VSBA has hesitated to come up with a model policy as yet. But we did look at quite a few.
During our discussion, we had a conversation both about the social media policy and then also the acceptable device policy, or the acceptable use
AUP.
policy. And so can you describe, we're going to come back and touch on that, because one of the things that I know I had brought up, you have instances where, at least in my own experience, where the staff is communicating with the student. You know, they may have an assignment, or the student may have a question of the teacher, and I think right now they may text each other or email each other. And so I just had a concern just to make sure that we're not limiting constructive use of the technology and the media to advance academics, but we are trying to restrict inappropriate use of social media. So I don't know if you all had any more time to consider that, or if that's just something we'll come back and review in the committee with the update of the acceptable use policy.
I know one thing that we discussed was that someone has to monitor the activity, and at this time, if it's going to be between teacher and student, it would have to be the building principal. So if there was some type of platform that the school decided that they were going to use such that kids could communicate with their teachers via some, social media outlet, then it would have to be monitored by the building principal, because someone would have to monitor the activity to ensure that it's appropriate. And I know there were some concerns about that, but again, it has to be monitored. And so if principals are going to support the use of some platform for their school, then they're going to have to be responsible for monitoring it, because there's no way at the central level we could monitor 50-plus schools.
Oh, no, I agree with that. I mean, as you all know, I tend to be more on the liberal side of this and not on the restrictive
Right,
side.
that's right.
So, I get messages from the gifted teachers. There's a gifted website that parents and students are encouraged to use, and I just want to make sure that in our process that we're not limiting student access to academic enrichment, but that we are being careful about all the things we know we need to have concerns about when it comes to our children and our staff communicating, so.
Prior to us approving this, has there been, and I'm not aware of it, so I must apologize. In the past 3.5 years, I've not read our employee social media policy. Have we had one, or has there been a regulation attached to any other policy that would have helped guide those decisions?
No, sir.
Okay.
One did not exist.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan's point, I don't feel that what our current state of things, that it's limiting at this point. I think that many divisions have decided not to develop or adopt additional policies to go deeper to try to describe what you just touched on in terms of how to develop a policy around interaction from a social media standpoint from a student to a staff member, because many times it's more of a restriction by doing so because of what you just raised. However, they hesitate to do it only when you already have policies in place that clearly outline the kind of communication that should take place between a staff member and a student anyway. So it covers that type of communication, period, which includes the social media part as well. So many times they don't develop a separate policy just for social media, as long as we are clear on, so it could be that we want to step back and take a look at how we describe that kind of interaction and communication between the staff and student, and not just say social media, but that interaction period, which would be inclusive of that. So that's how many have done it to prevent being limiting.
And then the last thing, Dr. Birdsong, we had some conversation around at what point in the employment process would the policy kick in? So if you apply for a job, does it kick in? If you have been made an offer but you haven't accepted, does it kick in? Can you just describe for the board based upon this policy, when it kicks in?
And Dr. Myers-Dobb, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have talked about when the new hire comes in to complete their new hire paperwork, that there would be a disclaimer that basically says you're responsible for being familiar with the policies and procedures of Norfolk Public Schools, that kind of thing, and it brings their attention to this policy. So at that time, but within the policy, it does say, prior to your employment, if you engage in such activity that could be perceived as a disruption, that there could be some disciplinary action associated with that.
You have a pre-existing condition.
That's right.
Can you do that?
Well, according to our attorney, we can.
Yes. All right.
But just to be clear, that's in the window, or that's in your entire history? So if
There was no window. I don't recall there being a window
right,
outlined in this policy.
But obviously, the further back it goes, the less you can argue that it's potential for disruption within the school system.
Okay. Is everybody?
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I just want to express a little unreadiness with the idea that something that you did 10 years ago follows you today, but I know they'll handle that. They'll handle it. If they don't handle it, I know it'll come to us, but I just think we need to be a little reasonable, about that.
And we did discuss that we would have to look at each case individually.
Right.
Couldn't lump all of the cases
Exactly.
together. You'd have to review all of the evidence for each case and then make a informed decision about how to move forward.
Yeah, because it could have happened before Brad got himself together. Quite possible. No, what did you?
I had a question about, for the policy committee, just in general, not with regards to this, or any of the other policies that are.
Was it a committee member? You have a question about a committee?
Well,
Just in rare form today, so.
my question is, I know that there were a couple of considerations of policy adjustments or alignments for the new Academy of Discovery at Lakewood, and I wasn't sure if that was on your list of things to look at. And then, where are we with our bring your own device to school policy? Because, as we look at our budget, technology and everything, that is going to have an effect on that, so I just wasn't sure where we were with that.
Well, I know in the latter one, we've talked about that, because that came up with the social media, both the bring your own device and the acceptable use, and whenever it makes sense to get it on the agenda with all the other ones, that is something that we're trying to revisit in a timely enough fashion, so if they make any updates when all the stuff comes out in the summer, we can get that back in a timely fashion.
Okay.
The Lakewood one, I'm not sure what else,
Do we need to do any policy adjustments for their admission, or, I wasn't sure, I just wanted to make sure that we had everything in
That I'm aware
place
of.
that they needed in order to,
Yeah, now, I'm not sure if admissions there would be driven by policy.
well, there is because we've looked at, we've started looking at out-of-district, we've looked at
Yes, we spent a lot of time with that.
open enrollment and trying to make sure there's alignment and their regulations were
Right.
updated.
Right.
But, the
Nothing in
process is, if
particular.
it's something that the board wants us to look at, then,
Be quiet.
it goes to the administration and team, and we'll figure it out, but I'm not, if there's something
Okay.
specific that you feel like we've
Okay.
missed, then, send it
the,
over.
the only thing that I'm aware of just as a member on the SPMT is the bring your own device, because that could impact how technology will be used in the building. And if students have the ability to bring their own device, it will change how they budget for technology. So I know that specifically. Thanks.
All right?
And just one point of clarity on the, just looking at the email, so the SEAC is looking to meet next week on policy change regarding homebound services.
IGBG and
Which is okay.
IGBGR.
And all these others are good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And we've had a conversation with Mrs. James Mitchell, and
Okay.
she stated that, yes, she got
Just wanna make
feedback
sure.
and input.
'Cause,
Is
I
that
will-
correct, Mrs. James Mitchell? KKA, service animals? Yes,
Yeah, you got that.
yes.
Right.
So we are good.
Just will make sure. 'cause
And that's why we pulled the other two, so that she could go back once again and present it,
I
so.
will get a social media alert, so just let you know.
She's on it.
Okay.
All right. All right, moving on to 2.07, Human Resources. Dr. King?
2.07, Human Resources Recruitment Efforts Update, to be presented by Dr. Myers-Dawes.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Dr. Houston, Ms. Doyle, members of the board, Dr. King. Provided a one-pager on our recruitment efforts starting in February. This is when we really start getting ready for recruiting for next school year. So there's a list of all the recruitment trips that we have planned through May at this time. We have a few of them highlighted that are going to be new this year. We are going to go to North Carolina A&T. And we'll also have an interview day with Christopher Newport. That'll be new this year. And then we have the National Minority Careers in Education Online Expo that we will be doing as well. So I mentioned this earlier in the year. This will be the first online job fair that we're going to try. So we're going to see how it goes, because there is another opportunity for one through another company, but we want to see how this one works out first. We also have 2 NPS job fairs listed on here that we're going to hold a little bit earlier than we have in the past. In April, we are looking at hopefully recruiting those May graduates locally, probably more so than anything. And then in May, we're going to have another one specifically targeting those graduates that go to school out of the area but hopefully are back home. So that's why we have those at the dates that we have them. And on the second page, are listed some other recruitment efforts that we're trying this year. And I have, again, shared some of these with you. The QR code, we have a card that we're going to have on the recruitment tables at the events, just to give them a quick access to a new URL that we have, npsk12.com jobs. And then we're going to try electronic sign-on at the job fairs using iPad technology, so we can quickly come back and send emails out to those that came to the table that we met with. Again, attach the link to the Norfolk Public Schools Human Resources webpage. And then radio advertisement, we locked in for 4 weeks in 2015 based on 2014 rates. So through the radio stations, they reach out to about 900,000 adults. So we got a lot of positive feedback when we did radio advertisements last year. When we saw different individuals, they said we heard it on the radio. We got a couple people from Pennsylvania that were vacationing at Sandbridge that heard the radio advertisement and came to the job fair. So, yes.
Cooperating teachers,
Mm-hmm.
people who work with student teachers, get a little money, right?
Depending on the university. Some of them do.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'd be interested in, and not necessarily data requests, but I'd be interested in the numbers of student teachers that Norfolk has had over the years, and you can't do that so easily because you haven't been here.
Mhm.
But it would be interesting to me, particularly, I think that's a rich resource for possibilities.
Oh, definitely.
I know some superintendents personally who used to use that very well,
Mhm.
and I would predict that if we nurture more and more relationships between the universities that are very nearby us, that would pan out. So the starting point is to analyze what we've had in the past.
Mhm.
And certainly with the professional development that's going on, as we're developing our own staff to be able to do that. So, again, I'm not requesting that. I just would hope
And-
that you would want to know that.
Oh,
and
definitely.
how it's trended, and perhaps maybe next year, double it. Sorry.
And we have a partnership with Norfolk State University with student teachers and their mentors that we're working with them now.
Great.
And then we are definitely we continue to build our relationship with Old Dominion.
Sure.
And so we are focusing on,
And we got Christopher New, we got a lot around.
Yes.
I just think that's a rich resource to explore.
Right.
And once they really like you and you really like them, that's
Mhm.
a really good way to start.
well, that's what we reached out to Christopher Newport. So this will be that interview
Good.
day. So hopefully that will bring good results too.
Thanks for hearing that.
Mhm.
Questions, comments?
Are we done with this segment of
Ye-
HR?
Yes, unless you have a question.
I had a question that I had sent out to you, Dr. Houston and Courtney, about the substitute teachers.
Right.
And I was wondering if we were going to address that.
Do you have that information in the email?
I do have the information. I wasn't sure if we were addressing it now or in the next
Okay.
session. So I do have that
Okay.
information if you would like me to share it.
I would love for you to share it.
Okay.
That'd be great.
All right, and several of your questions, we had to get information from budget department, so Ms. Ingram shared the information with us. So I'll just go through the questions.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. She's going to ask the question, so
Okay,
just for context, so people know
Yes.
exactly what question's been answered.
all right. So the first question was, what are the total funds that MPS has for long-term subs and guest subs? For this fiscal year, there was $1,086,000 budgeted for long-term subs, and then $1,065,000 budgeted for daily subs.
Okay.
The next question was, how is that money dispersed? The money is allocated, schools are allocated daily subs based on 4 days per teacher, times the number of regular vocational and special education teachers assigned to the building, times the daily sub rate. So they basically get 4 days per classroom teacher.
Total, okay.
And there was a note here that keep in mind that fiscal year 2015 budget was based on the staffing for fiscal year 2014, based on the time that the budget falls in the year. Is it up to the discretion of the principal of how to use substitute monies? The funds are to be used specifically for classroom teachers only. These funds cannot be moved to other lines.
Okay.
If a principal needs more money for substitutes, how do they get the funds? They can make a request to Business Finance and Budget for additional funds. They have to provide a justification for that. And once they do that, analysis is done to determine how much funds would be needed. Again, they might share whether they've been doing coverage in the building because they've exhausted those funds. Another case could be if there was a high flu season, so they've had a large number of teachers out. So that request can be made, and additional funds will be provided if it can be justified.
Okay.
What is the MPS policy on combining or splitting classrooms when a substitute cannot be found? Do we find this acceptable? There is no policy on this, there is a practice. We do have, there is mention of it in the MOU, talking about secondary teachers during their duty bell can be used to cover classes if a substitute is not available. And then for elementary, it says that the principal will work out a plan with the teachers in the building. So it doesn't specifically address the combining or splitting of classes. Just so you know, too, that when a teacher puts the information in SubFinder, they have the option of saying that is a substitute needed or is a substitute not needed. That can also be changed by a building administrator. So sometimes they do proactively make some decisions if they know it's a certain teacher where maybe they have a content area that works very well together. They've made plans to split those classes, so some of those decisions are made at the building level. When do you let parents know that a long-term sub is in the class? This would be a building level administrator decision. I can't really speak on that. The executive directors might be able to provide some more information on their expectation with that. The last question, were we over budget, under budget, or at par last year with regards to our substitute funds? For fiscal year 2014, our total sub budget, which includes both long-term and daily subs, was 97% spent. Long-term subs was overspent, and daily subs were underspent.
Okay, Dr. Thornton, I think, has some additional information or
Yeah, I was just
comment.
going to add the decision on when the request is made for additional substitute funds, then we would also consult with the executive director and ask that the executive director work with the principal to determine and basically vet the request. It won't just be a finance decision.
Courtney?
You know, as a result of Dr. Gabriel's questions regarding sub, I looked at the budget for substitutes, and I noticed that it was less in the fiscal year that we're currently in than in the previous year, which I'm sure is impacting schools. What was the reason for the reduction in that from year over year? And how are the schools impacted by that?
Well, when we built the current year's budget last year, we looked at what the trends had been in the previous year, so we tried to make some adjustments as we were trying to close the gap. So basically, that's why we made some reductions.
You know, I would just suggest that if we look at the financial report, Dr. Thornton, that you do publish monthly, and we see the percent spend, I bet that's going to be higher this year at this moment in time than last year. So I
Because the
bet
balance itself,
is less.
the original budget was less.
Right.
As you heard, the net was 97% expended compared to budget for last year, so that was in part the basis for adjusting to really rebase what the actual had been.
So I
But
would
the
just
intent
ask-
is not that if we find ourselves at some point in the school year to say that we can't respond to the need, but it will need to be vetted through the appropriate executive director.
And so, sorry.
Sure.
So a principal would need to do that well in advance of having no monies left in his or her budget, because this process probably takes, a week or 2 weeks in order for them to,
I would think a week, if they request funds, I mean, to have a conversation with the executive directors, and I wouldn't think it would be any more than a week. And I know it's a line that they do closely watch. I mean, it's a
Right.
conversation that we often hear.
right,
Mhm.
right. So, word that I've heard in the community has been that, and this was last year also, that there was some concern about combining classes, especially close to SOL time. And so I would just ask if we could, Dr. King, if we could have our executive directors to keep a close watch, especially on our focus and priority schools, to see if they need to have any additional funds or keeping track of their substitute monies, and so that they don't have to combine their classes, so that the students will not lose any individual time or as much time as they can with their teachers.
If I may, I know sometimes principals may do that, not because they want a substitute, it's because they want the instruction to be delivered by a highly qualified individual. So if it's close to, and you can jump in, Lauren, if you'd like, if it's close to SOL testing time, they want, every minute of every day is valuable. And so, as opposed to having, a daily,
Fun day.
yes, that's right. They want the children to be taught by an individual that knows the content.
That makes sense. That's actually a very good point to bring up. Now we have a viewing audience and, we're bringing up these questions. That's a very, very good, valid point.
And another challenge is that sometimes there are not enough subs available. The weather's nice out. It's not like they have to come
Spring.
because you call them. So sometimes you're looking, or sometimes they cancel out. You think you've got a sub, the teachers put it in the night before, someone's picked up the order, and we're waiting, and they call and say, something came up. The sun came out one.
And I'm not aware, in my 2 years here, of a situation where additional substitute funds were needed for a school or a cluster of schools, that was not made known to us and we didn't address it. Quite honestly, in the 2 years I've been here, it's never come up. So my point is that if there is a determined need vetted with the executive director, then by all means, let us know. It'll be addressed.
Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much.
And just to comment on the issue about the reliable pool of guest teachers, we have increased the pool of daily guest teachers, and a couple things that have been put into place is that they have to work so many days within a period of time, and if they don't, then they're basically contacted and said that if you want to continue to remain on the in the sub pool, then you need to work so many days, or let us know. For example, a couple of them have even started calling the HR generalist that oversees this and saying, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks, so I will not be taking jobs. So she makes note of that, so we continue to have reliable subs. In addition, we have advertised for long-term guest teachers in addition to daily guest teachers, so we can build our pool of guest teachers that have 4-year degrees or more, and they are available to serve as long-term guest teachers when we need them. So we're putting different measures in place to increase the reliability of the people that are serving in that capacity.
And I think that it's important that Norfolk has a very unique distinction amongst a lot of other school districts in that we have a very transient military population. So, when we look at our docket and we see, teachers having to transfer because a spouse has to move, we have to be able to fill that gap with a good qualified long-term sub. So it is important for us to maintain that pool, and it's not because we're concerned about teachers leaving the district and us having to fill gaps with that regard, but it's because we do have that transient population, so.
And also the teachers that go out on FMLA, because if they're going out for a period of time, then we provide the long-term guest teacher, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2.08, operations. Dr. King?
Item 2.08 will consist of an update on Maury High School facility assessment process. Dr. Thornton.
Thank you, Dr. King, Dr. Houston, school board members, good afternoon. This will be a very brief oral update for you related to the recently convened Maury High School Facility Assessment Committee. Given the school board's ongoing concern, Dr. King, regarding the condition of Maury High School, Dr. King asked that we, the administration, convene a group of Maury High School community stakeholders to really, for some, to educate, for others to inform in a deeper way as to the current and developing condition of Maury High School as a facility, both the exterior that the board has discussed publicly as well as the conditions of the interior. So that representative group has been convened. It includes representatives from the Maury faculty, the Maury PTA, the
Boosters.
West Side business community, if you will, the boosters, a student, 2 students. So we actually had the first meeting of the committee on Monday, where we conducted a tour of the facility, really to just so everyone could see the current condition and some of the concerns that we believe are going to continue to develop in the days, months, and years to come. So the primary purpose of the committee is, again, to sensitize these representative groups as to the condition, what the concerns are, but then to take it a step further and to contract with the appropriate architecture engineering firm to update the previous assessments of the facility as it, in terms of its viability going forward for the next generation, if not 2 or 3 generations. And really, at the end of the day, the expectation is that that updated facility assessment should provide us with at least 2 options as it relates to what do we do with Maury High School as it relates to making it viable as a facility over the next 25 to 50 years. And that could include, quite honestly, do you renovate the existing facility, which has been done on multiple occasions, or do you rebuild the facility? The charge of the committee is not to make that recommendation, but it is to understand the process by which we arrived at those options that at some point the superintendent will present to the board for public discussion, deliberation, and then as the board sees fit to engage the community in a much deeper conversation around it. So that committee has been convened. The expectation is that the work of the committee will conclude hopefully by the end of March, the first part of April. And then we'll keep the board abreast as we go through the process. So again, the idea is to get an update on the current assessment of the facility, its viability going forward, and some options to continue Maury High School as a viable school.
Very well. Thank you. Warren?
I would hope that we love meeting together as a school board. I think that's part of our joy. But what I would like to make sure of, that the variable of the walkthrough that this committee sees, that we see together as a school board. That's not, I'm looking at my colleagues. I really hope that we all could see the same thing that the people who are on this committee see, because I think that standardizing that variable, those variables, to make sure that when they say things, that we have seen the same things on which they base their comments. I would highly recommend a field trip because we already like that kind of time together.
Absolutely, and our contact transportation will get us a bus. And, but Dr. Stewart shared those concerns with me the other day, and I'm certainly in agreement, and we'll move forward and coordinate.
Bag
that.
lunch, or are we going to have lunch there?
Well, just fruit.
No
We'll just-
frill.
Fresh fruit.
For lunch.
Good.
Charlie's is right.
No frill.
And perhaps other city officials would be interested in participating in that as well, to the board's discretion.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any comments?
No.
Just a smile.
I'm confused, so I'm just letting it go.
Okay.
That's something I,
No, just I let it go.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thorne, sir. Item 2.09, community engagement. Dr. King.
2.09, community engagement consisting of Norfolk Education Foundation, Start on Success, Design Concept Update, and Virginia School Boards Association month for February, current month. It's Mr. Clanton and Ms. Mather.
All right, thank you, Dr. King, members of the school board. I am giving you kind of a teaser, I guess, for the full presentation that will occur on February 18th by our Vice Chair of Administration for the Norfolk Education Foundation, and no stranger to this board, former school board member, Dr. Linda McClooney. She is representing the foundation on the Start on Success Committee with Norfolk Public Schools. The committee has been working diligently, and they have secured a grant from the Virginia Commonwealth University that will pay for internships for our students, our special education students that are earning their general diplomas. Also, Norfolk Public Schools will be the test site, will be the first school district in the Commonwealth of Virginia to actually perform this program, and that it's had outstanding results from throughout the country and other locations. So that's really all I have regarding that. She'll give you a full detail and be able to answer any questions during the formal session on February 18th. I would like to add a caveat that I did receive email in regard to items regarding the background checks, and that we are addressing those, and that primarily it's in the area of mentoring. In that particular, we're working on making sure that there's a smooth transition there. But we're staying on our time frame with the 10-day turnaround time.
And I think, Mr. Clinton, you're referencing that it was during our joint meeting with the NCPTA, it came up in my session that there was concern about the delay of folks getting kind of through the process.
Mhm.
So that was discussed that evening and
Yep.
therefore noted, and even before we wanted to get the final results back from that evening and final compilation of things we needed to act on, the administration took that to heart and was looking into the matter
Yep.
before we went any further.
So I definitely appreciate the feedback.
Yes, right away.
I agree that we need to make sure that we make that process efficient as possible, but in the current climate that we live in today, it is very important that that is very thorough
Mhm.
and very exacting, because we can't afford to let the wrong person slip through the cracks.
Definitely. And through the process that we do have in place right now, we've had 2 instances this year where the process that we have in place have actually caught individuals who are on the National Sex Offender Registry, where we were able to notify our schools and to keep our students safe. So the process is working, and we are very diligent in reviewing that information. And we're just going to continue to make sure we work it as fast as possible.
Brad, that's a good point that you bring up, because I can't remember if I saw it on the news or if I read it in the paper, but the military, do they have to report whether or not they are a sex offender? Do they have to report to an entity, like if you're in a neighborhood? Who do they report to? And then would they be required to put that on a background check? Because, and I could be wrong, but this is just for clarification, for folks in the military, do they have to put that on their background check when we do our background check? That might be something that we need to look
Yeah.
into.
Active duty military are required, just like any other citizen, to be registered to the National Sex Offender Registry, so they're included there. And honestly, if they're caught with anything like that, they're probably not going to be in the military much longer. So they do have a process that the Department of Defense goes through every so often, within a particular time frame, within a year, where they actually do that process. We do have an arrangement with our active duty that we will accept their background checks, accept their information, and we do put that into our system there. And we work very closely with their liaison as well, to, make sure that information and so forth. But a lot of those individuals come in for specific programs, or when ships are, they're on, as you would say, land duty, and they're not actually out to sea, and their ships are in the dry docks and so forth. But our City of Norfolk Police Department, first offenders, all those individuals go through background checks, and we do accept those as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Last month, we presented an item to you about the updating of the division's logo to support our mission and vision. We don't have a new presentation for you about that. We just wanted to bring it back to you in case you had any additional feedback or questions. Mr. Clanton also reported at the time that the foundation's logo would be updated to support the division's move in that direction as well. So just wanted to open it up for an opportunity if there are any other questions or points of discussion on that.
Yes, Mark.
Since it has budget implications, I like the idea that this is going to be a migratory process, that you're not going to try and change everything at once, and it makes a lot of sense. The old logo was very nice, but I think this is more up-to-date, and it certainly does communicate something that we're trying to communicate.
Thank you. Okay. And then the only other thing on our list today is we just wanted to give you a little update and preview on items that we are recognizing currently this month, and that you will also have an opportunity to recognize at your formal board meeting. First of all, thank you for your public service, because it is School Board Appreciation Month. And we do have an appreciation item on our website currently, and again, thank you. It is School Board Clerk Appreciation Week, the week of February 16th through 20th, so we will have another opportunity to recognize Ms. Banks and all the very hard work she does for our division. Crossing Guard Appreciation Day is actually next week on February 11th, but we'll have an opportunity to thank our crossing guards at that time. It is also Music in Our Schools Month and Youth Art Month, and we're always very proud and pleased of our music and art programs. So thank you. That's just a little preview. We have more.
Comments or questions? Thank you very much. Item 2.10, Business and Finance. Dr. King?
110, Business and Finance will consist of FY 2016 priority follow-up, budget priority follow-up, highlighting a program evaluation process thus far, as well as school board office budget review. Dr. Thornton.
All right, thank you, Dr. King. School board members, as Dr. King mentioned, this is an opportunity as we move towards the presentation of the school superintendent's proposed budget on next Wednesday for the board to continue its conversation regarding priorities for next year. If there are any priorities or updates that the board would like for us to have as we kind of finalize the budget. Obviously, we're pretty much finished at this point. It's just a matter of finalizing all the numbers and preparing a document and the PowerPoint presentation. So, but if there are any additional thoughts or guidance from the board.
I'd like your overall evaluation of this question. In my opinion, for the past handful of years, the state of Virginia has decreased its support for local public education, causing the city of Norfolk and other localities to take up the slack. And we've done that, and I'm very grateful. And at your particular time, as you read the state of this process, do you see that reduction continuing this for the next fiscal year or not?
For FY16 that's coming up?
Yeah.
There's no reduction in the second year of the biennium based on Governor McCulloch's proposed budget.
Mm-hmm.
But we've yet to see the House, the Senate, and then ultimately the General Assembly's budget. But I don't know, there's no indication right now that there's going to be a reduction in state funding due to a change in the formulas. Obviously, as we've shared.
Or unfunded mandates or any number of things.
No new unfunded mandates that I'm aware of.
Right.
Obviously, we've reported to the board there's a net reduction for us, but that's driven primarily by our enrollment decline.
I'm going to ask you that question again when the process is over in the spring.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Well, just one area Dr. King mentioned earlier in regards to the professional development work of the board. And so as we look at that and look at the projections for the board's budget, there may be just some revisiting of that just to try to make sure that, I know we're accounting for our trainings that we do with VSBA, but if there are other specific professional development training that we may need to do focused on school improvement or other things, just want us to consider that as we move forward with our final budget consideration. Follow me?
No, I'm not following. I was trying really hard.
You look? Yeah, so I'm saying I'm looking on the board docs. We have a projected budget for us,
Right.
for the school board.
Right.
We talked earlier about the professional development needed for the school board. I want to make sure that the professional development needs match the budget.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because some of the items on there just have one board
Right.
member attending a conference. And so maybe if on these goals that we're going to look at, if we need to have more participation, that's accounted for in the budget.
Right.
And so since we moved there, which is,
Could I go somewhere else before we go there?
okay,
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was
Yeah.
part of the same. I'm sorry.
okay, that's okay. Cool.
So there are three things I just wanted to chat about when it comes to budget, and I'm going back to the document that we used
Yeah.
and discussed last week as well. It's the green document that Janelle put together that had some of our comments related to our priorities. So the first thing I would say is, I'd like to reinforce that we fully fund the transformation initiatives so that they are successful in the vision that they have been laid out, for the vision that they have been laid out. So, for instance, the Academy for Discovery at Lakewood. I think it's important, we're in year one of that. We're going into year two, and that's this next budget fiscal year. And then there's going to be year three. And I think it's important that we fully fund that at whatever they need so that school is successful come day one. And so that might be a pullout that then is, if that's whatever figure it is, then it's embedded back in because it's professional development, it's facility, it's technology, it's whatever, and then it's embedded back into those buckets. But just as with the reconfiguration, the 4 schools, are they fully funded for their year 2? And have we accounted for how much that's going to cost? And is that back embedded into the budget so that we're not looking at December of this year and there's not enough money for these programs? Because wasn't pulled out, it wasn't accounted for, et cetera. So I just feel strongly that whatever we said we were going to do with transformation, that those elements are fully funded within this year's budget. The other thing I would say is we have priority, focus, and as we call it, bubble schools, schools that are 3-year warned. And I would like us to consider adding additional resources to those schools that will help those schools accelerate their improvement. And if that means funding for an additional dean, additional assistant principal, social worker, teachers, interventionists, tutors, mentors, time, then I would suggest that we say, okay, of those 11 schools, 12 schools, how much would it cost in terms of real hard dollars to add those additional resources? And I'm not saying you take it from somewhere else in the division, I'm saying it's then above and beyond. And that might be difficult to talk about because we know that we're facing a significant deficit, I understand that. But I do think we need to have good awareness and knowledge of what it would take fiscally to do so, because at the end of the day, which leads to my third point, is we still need to, as a board, to decide, are we going to put in a balanced or a budget that has an increase of X amount of $1 million? And are we going to prioritize what those additional millions are so that should we get it, there's great clarity, because as a board, we've said this is our first priority. If we have additional funding, this is our second. And that's what priority 1 is going to cost and priority 2 is going to cost versus it's part of professional development, which is kind of global, which I support fully. But let's pull out what the priorities are so it's very clear to the community what we view and how much that associated cost is. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make now before we begin to discuss even further next week and then the weeks thereafter. Those first 2 points I do feel strongly about, especially those schools of need and the transformation. That's a huge initiative and focus of the division.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good point. Very, very good point. Well said. Noel?
Ditto, and the priorities that are on board docs right now, FY 2016 budget planning development priorities recommended, is that the same document that we had when we had this?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so.
Say that one more time.
Okay, what's under board docs right now, 2016 budget planning and development priorities recommended. So if I go back to board docs and I refresh, so.
You should see the green document that board members are.
So is it on that same document in green? Or is it?
The green document that Mrs. Gordon was referring to.
Right,
called the
so
board
this is,
member card.
so this is just added on to there.
Right, she was
Okay,
referring to it.
so this is one document that's on there, and then that's another because in my mind, that
It's the same
document should be combined.
No, that's the same document.
Janelle, could you just open the document?
What-
to clarify maybe?
When we have, I see a presentation, and then I see FY 2016 Budget Planning Development Priorities Matrix,
That's that.
which is the suggested one, which is what you have up here. But that is not reflective of any of the items that we commented on.
The commented ones are board member cards, the very last attachment.
The very last attachment, okay, but on this document, so we just need to figure out which document we're gonna work from. Because if we have a lot of different documents circulating out there, then it's gonna create confusion. Is the board saying one thing, is the administration saying something different? We need to all be together and unified. So we've given our input, so I think that the document that is, that we look at and that we base our discussions off of is a combination of those two things, because I don't see a grant writer on here. I don't see, I know that in our budget, we have the legal discussion that we had about
Right.
getting services from legal items, but their time, I don't see that here, so I just want to make sure that
That's in that document.
Right, that what we have here is also representative there, and that we're not working off of many different
Gotcha.
documents. So we're all going off of, one main item.
Just for process clarification of and I'm asking for correction here, because the superintendent's going to present to us a proposed budget based upon all these discussions that we've had.
Correct.
And then once he does that, then that's when we'll have the opportunity to then cross-check, add, discuss, and so
Okay.
forth. So I think that's part of what I think makes the process a little difficult, because we are still discussing priorities at the same time. He's a week away from presenting his proposal, and I think, let's let him get to his proposal, and then we can
And he
come
has
back
that
and
information.
focus on it.
Okay.
Right.
Right. I'm not saying he's not taking it into consideration, but okay, so we're
But
gonna get
but that document is what Dr. Thornton said earlier, had not changed from what he gave to us, so that stays consistent. We have our comments in green, and then eventually we'll hear back from the superintendent what he recommends based upon all of that stuff together. It's my understanding. Is that correct? Okay.
All right.
It's not like you haven't heard this before, but my time is getting short.
All of our
I've been on
time
this
is getting
board for
short.
4 years, and Dr. King hasn't been here the whole time. But in my 7 years of paying attention to Norfolk Public Schools, what I've been sad to see is that the element second most to the teacher that can contribute to student learning is time. Not just starting before. There's bureaucratic reasons that maybe have stood in our way. Not just starting before Labor Day, but I explicate. After school, additional time in school, Virginia Beach did it, summer school, Saturday school, all of those ways to add time. Norfolk has not seen its way to add that more time in the time I've been paying attention. When I was in the role that Dr. King is in, the first thing I did when we were faced with being 88th in the state on the only test that was given was to deal with time. The result was, 5 years later, we were 10th in the state. Now, that small, minute school system compared to the massive task Dr. King and his colleagues have, but time is critical, and it's not just about pre-Labor Day start. It's about looking at all of those things, and as Tracy Whitaker said, it's about looking at how other entities can support us in that, with our partners and whatever. So I emphasize that because my time's getting short, and I may not have the opportunity beyond a few months to say this, and I say that respectfully because I know you already know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will move us, I guess, toward the end of this conversation back to the question raised about the school board's budget. Each year, we have this very same discussion, especially related to the school board budget, because there are such few line items, both the total amount of our budget and the various uses. And so when we talk about considering reductions, there are very limited areas that we can consider them. And so Courtney and I had an opportunity to sit with our board clerk along with Dr. Thornton to just take a look at it again. And quite frankly, the only places where we could really find any reduction was perhaps an area, and you all just mentioned, an area that perhaps we may need additional support, and that is in our conferences. And so we have considered it, you'll notice, under travel, meals, and lodging, a consideration for reduction. Now, of course, this would be a board decision. If you notice all the way over on the justification, it would be a recommendation only one board member attend non-VSBA, NSBA conferences, meetings, or events. And again, this is my 6th year on the board, and each year we've had this conversation at this time of the year. And a part of the question has been, if you pay X amount of dollars for the membership and you only send one board member, are you really getting your bang for the buck? The other thing, though, that we also embrace is that we feel that we should demonstrate, as the district has to, a willingness to make some reductions in our budget in an attempt to deal with the funding gaps that we are experiencing now for the 6th year in a row. So, yes, Courtney.
If I could add, the other thing I learned going through the process too is that our memberships to NSBA, VSBA, and CUBE also entitle, they're for the division. So it's not just the board's benefit, but the division, the leadership. They go to conferences as a result and get the rates. They get access to the professional development through these organizations as well. So if we didn't participate as members in these organizations, then we would be sacrificing also the opportunity for division leaders to benefit from what these organizations offer.
Thoughts, comments?
You're asking for feedback. I can't see anything to reduce. At the same time, I certainly don't think we ought to increase. But two valuable things. I think our relationship with Virginia School Boards Association is critical.
Right.
And it's critical for the policy service. We could never pay for that out of local budget.
Right.
And it's critical for the guidance they can give us, the ability for Dr. King to pick up the phone and call them, as well as the Superintendent's Association. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a priority. I cannot offer any suggestions for reduction. I think probably what ought to triple the school board clerk's salary and whatever. But at this particular time, I can't see any reductions, but at the same time, I also certainly wouldn't see any increases.
I think these Kit Kats are cheaper than the Snicker. We might,
We can always discuss rooming together, and that might do well for those people who are running in the wards, build relationships. So,
So on that note,
not gonna touch that.
So each ward could be pitted against the other.
but we talked about, and Ms. Doyle just mentioned, looking at the overall budget based upon what we need to be successful.
Sure.
And so I appreciate and I agree with the idea of trying to cut and streamline whatever we need to do with the school board's budget. But if I know we all agree that, the board plays a significant role in the setting policies and the things that we do. All I'm asking is, let's just make sure we are clear on what any school board needs to be successful, and that we allocate it appropriately. I mean, there are other school boards we know around the state that pay big salaries, or pay salaries that we don't do that. So it's all kinds of things that I think we already do.
Sacrifice.
And many times, many of the trips and local travel that we take anyway, we don't always ask for reimbursement for that either. But I think it's important from as we're aligning where we are as a district with the strategic plan, with the schools that we have that are warned and at various levels of status, that we make sure that the school board is getting what it needs to be successful. And if that results in some increase, then we need to be able to make the argument why that's important. If we find that it's covered, then so be it. I just want to make sure we've had that discussion that aligns with the MOU and the things that the state has asked us to do and we know we need to do, and then make sure that the two line up. That's all.
Point taken. There's one other item relative to program evaluation. I believe Dr. Thornton was prepared to.
Yeah, just Dr. Bailey and her team, along with Cabinet, basically reviewed the results of some targeted program review. I think I shared with the board early on in the early planning stages that to engage in a full-blown evaluation process wasn't necessarily realistic in a 3-month period. So what Dr. Bailey and her team have done in cooperation with other members of Cabinet and department heads is try to identify some specific areas, particularly as it relates to some instructional software programs. Also looking at some, I wouldn't say they're programs, but some prior initiatives as related to staffing or differentiating staffing that comes under various acronyms that was maybe put in place 10-plus years ago, to see if in fact there were some opportunities to refine that or save there or even enhance. But I think what you're going to see next week is that we will bring a recommendation to make some reductions in, as it relates to some specific instructional software programs that, based on the review and based on the extensive conversation with executive directors, curriculum and instruction, and members of Ms. Campson's team yesterday, that we'll have some reductions in those areas, but probably in the neighborhood of $300,000 to $400,000. Until you really staff up or contract professional program evaluators to really do extensive research and evaluation, we're going to be limited as to, I believe, as to what we have the capacity to do.
Brad, then what?
I appreciate that, Dr. Thornton. I know it's $300,000 in a $350 million budget is not a lot of money, but it is a good sign that we are sending to our stakeholders that we are doing the very best we can with the dollars that we're given. And I hope this continues on, even as limited as we can, as an ongoing effort year-round. Not that this is just a 3-month effort, that we start May 1st, after we drop off the budget to the city, that we start working and looking at it for 2016, 17.
Thank you.
Since this is the year we start out in the hole, you already know there's some things that we've got to make up. I can't remember the millions, but it's more than 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, revenue was nearly $7 million.
Yeah.
This isn't the first year.
Right.
This is a continuation.
Yeah, yeah. Because of that, there are some larger programs, and the one that comes to mind, and I'm not targeting this, and I don't think you can do a proper evaluation of something after 2 years, but such as Achieve 3000, or big programs that are big ticket items. I say if you can concentrate your time on predicting that, I'm not sure you can make a decision with as short a time, but perhaps you can. So I think instead of trying to do everything, perhaps looking at where the big ticket program evaluations would be a place to start. I'm not advocating for reductions in that or anything else, but that would be where I would start, and perhaps there's something there.
And those were 2 of the programs or
Right.
software programs that Dr. Beal and her team looked at.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Very well. All right. We had 2.11. Dr. King, any remarks? Thank you, Dr. Bailey. You did a very good job.
No additional remarks over and beyond what has been discussed. I think we've been pretty thorough,
Okay, very good.
unless the board has questions.
No questions. 2.12, board matters. I have just a couple of items, quick items. Of course, we received good information from our discussion today for consideration for agenda planning for March, our board, our work session in March. The business meeting agenda has already been posted. If there's any comments or questions on that, we are certainly open to those. We learned recently, of course, of the passing of one of our former employees, and a life that certainly had considerable impact here in the city of Norfolk, as well as in Norfolk Public Schools. I'd like to read a message from the board relative to her life and passing, and then I'll say more about our plans for a more formal acknowledgement at the board meeting on the 18th. You have the letter in front of you. In 1959, 17 brave young people changed our community forever. The Norfolk 17, as they came to be known, were the first black students to attend the all-white public schools in our city. Patricia Godbolt White was one of those pioneering students. For her entire life, she remembered being very scared during integration, but also convinced that she was doing the right thing when she enrolled in segregated Norview High School. She no longer had to attend an all-black school that was so far away. She had to buy a bus ticket to get there because transportation was not offered to black children. When she graduated from Norview in 1960, she was an honor student. She continued to make history as the first black female graduate of Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland, where she earned a bachelor's degree in biology. She earned a master's degree in urban studies from Norfolk State University. Ms. White was so dedicated to public education that she went on to teach school for 42 years. She spent the majority of her career at Booker T. Washington High School. She was more than a teacher. She became a mentor and mother figure to countless children. Even after she retired, she never stopped telling her story. She hoped the living history lesson would help today's youth appreciate their many opportunities, which were hard-fought and hard-won through the sacrifices of a former generation. The governance leadership team of the Norfolk Public Schools honors the life, the lessons, and the legacy of Patricia Godbolt White, who passed away last week at age 72. Her contributions will not be forgotten. We are also considering, and I trust that we'll have full governance team support, that on the 18th in our business meeting, if her family is able to, members of her family are able to be here, that we would in a more formal way recognize and acknowledge her life, legacy, and contributions to education in the city of Norfolk. Comments or thoughts? I understand Mr. Jordan was at the funeral service, and thank you for being there. Okay? Thank you very much. The other item, of course, Reverend Haywood had to leave a little early this evening due to the fact he was not feeling well, and we have scheduled the two of us to be on the Student Support Services Subcommittee in the morning. And so if there's someone that's available to join me for that subcommittee meeting, we certainly need someone to step in for Ed. If
Dr. Robinson and I still have some joyous meeting ourselves tomorrow.
have some what?
What time are you meeting?
We meet, isn't it at 8? Yes. Okay.
Construction committee.
Okay. Well,
Dr. Robinson, would you be able to make it?
Roger, 7?
I can't do it.
Okay.
I just can't.
I can probably do it at 7.
Can we leave it up now?
Oh, wait a second. No, I cannot. I can't move that. I've got another conflict.
We'd have to change the date then, because, well, can one person do it? I mean, that's not typically the way we, okay, understand.
I could
Yeah.
support one person doing it. I would trust the judgment of one person in the absence of inconveniencing everyone else.
But everyone would have the information, and so it's not like the one person makes the decision, makes only a recommendation based on the recommendation coming from the administration. I mean, if you all are okay with it, I would certainly go on with it.
Just a question of practice and process. Do we have a policy, or is there something that says there must be 2?
I would
Yeah,
predict it would be a
I'm not-
practice and not a policy.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
How large is the docket?
There's probably 9 or 10, yeah. I think it's about 10,
We're getting the,
On there?
now from, Reverend Wood.
yeah. But I mean, if the board is okay with it, I'm okay.
I mean, if it starts right at 9, and I'm out by 9:45, I can do it. I have a 10 o'clock appointment that I have to get to.
Sure.
What we did one time was, this is just the student support.
Correct, this is not the reinstatement, right.
So sometimes what we did was, if you read it ahead of time and you didn't have any problems with what the recommendations were, you just said, I didn't have any
You could
problems with the
submit, yeah.
recommendations, so.
So a person,
Ed could still comment if he wanted to.
Yeah.
if he felt up to read it tonight, if he hadn't already read it.
Yeah.
Even tomorrow.
I mean, if they give me a copy of it, I'll read it tonight.
Okay,
Can it be delivered to my house?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
okay. All right, thank you all very much. The only other thing, I thought I saw, and I could be wrong, a conflict with, I believe it's Hot Topics.
Yes. No, it's It's the regional meeting, the regional forum,
Right, it's the same day as,
our
We
March.
fixed that. We did it every year.
we fixed it, did we? For March?
And every year we have the
That conflict where
and I
we-
thought it changed the schedule so we wouldn't have it again.
It's on the 11th or the 18th, isn't it?
Dealing with the Tidewater Regional meeting for VSBA Tidewater Regional meeting.
Right. It's either the 11th or the 18th of March, I thought I saw on the calendar. Is it-
It is the 11th.
Yeah.
Do we have a budget meeting? Is that what that is, at 11?
Yes, sir, we have a budget
That's
meeting,
why.
Right.
On the 11th.
And you're still an officer with that.
Yes, I am. Yes. Yeah, I thought okay. Because usually the dates for the regional meeting come out early, and I thought we were working to try to avoid having the conflict, so.
Yeah, we rolled out these budget meetings. I don't think we considered that.
So when is the regional meeting, at what time of day?
It's
You don't have it?
May 11th,
Then March.
I mean, sorry, March
yeah.
11th. There's a opportunity to tour Achievable Dream.
That's right.
I think it's around 4:30.
What news?
Then the meeting starts, say, 5:30, and it's at Heritage High School in Newport News.
Right.
Okay, so our March 11th meeting is 1 to 3, so technically someone could be there by 4:30.
I hope we all go.
Right, so there really isn't a conflict, is there?
Well, that's why I'm trying to get clarity
No,
on.
Only
we
if
wanted
there's a-
three.
only if there's a
Okay, then we
tunnel.
should be good.
Y'all need to make reservations.
What time is the school tour?
4:30.
There's a brochure that just went out.
Yeah.
So if we stick to our 1 to 3, then we should be fine if we needed to travel
That's on the 4th.
March
The
11th.
11th?
Yeah. So I don't think we have a conflict. But what we can do is add that to just a notation that that's the regional meeting at 4:30. Day. Okay?
Okay, that's all I have. Floor is open for closing thoughts or comments on the board matters, and then that'll be our last order of business. Dr. Stewart?
Thank you, sir. A single sheet of paper is from the National School Boards Association visit to Washington. School board members from across the country visited their elected officials on Monday and Tuesday. Both senators met with the contingent from Virginia, and the reason why I wanted to say something, the good news is, if you look on this sheet, the first sentence says, "Your leadership is needed to influence ESEA reauthorization." This is big because our senators believe that Senator Alexander, now I thought it was Kenny, it's not. It's Lamar, Senator Alexander from Tennessee, believes this is going to get to a vote. This is a big thing because reauthorization could be big. So this is a single sheet about what we were seeking, and it looks like at least some of it may come true.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gabriel, anything else?
Looking forward to March, hearing about more time, hopefully the pre-K information about classes for some middle-class families perhaps, and February 14th is not only Valentine's Day, but it is the 100th day of school, 80 more days after that. Who's counting?
Sad.
And thanks to our teachers.
Yes.
That's a sad.
And all of our staff.
Okay. Happy Valentine's Day.
The Tidewater Regional Spring Forum, the dinner actually starts at 6, so there's a tour at 4:30, there's art show and exhibits at 5, the dinner actually starts at 6, so hopefully that gives plenty enough time for us to get to the dinner, and I'd be more than happy to yield some of our work session time to the students and teachers for their time.
I'm confused. Which work session?
Actually, we put that on the list for the next work session in March, that we wanted to add that as an agenda item that you had mentioned last time. Absolutely.
I'm confused. Now I'm confused.
Say more about it.
So Mr. Jordan had mentioned that he wanted as a board for us to discuss with the administration, what is it we could do to remove barriers from teachers in classrooms? What is it we can do to free up their time so they have more instructional opportunity with children? So that was what I put on as an addition that we wanted to just
Oh,
discuss
okay.
as a matter at the next March
At the
work
next
session,
one. Okay.
simply.
At the work session.
Oh, good with that.
Okay.
Yeah. You had mentioned that last time. We
Right.
weren't able to accommodate this time, but we can do it next time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now I understand and support it.
You're up.
All right.
Oh. I just want to mention the community exchange breakfast last Friday was very impressive. I think our message is getting out to the community that with all the challenges that we have, we're making great strides and we're moving forward and looking for good things to come.
Very well. Sam?
Nothing additional?
Okay. Wendy?
I was pleased to hear more about the CTE school this afternoon. I think it's a great way to start helping us and the community understand even more what the opportunity is before us, which is, I think, tremendous and enormous for not only the city of Norfolk, but for the region and for the Commonwealth. This could be really groundbreaking for the entire state, for us to have this here housed in our region. So I'm thrilled at the opportunity. Dr. King, again, I do want to express that I thought your State of the School address last Friday, like Dr. Robinson said, was tremendous. I thought you captured the essence of where we are as a division and our growth and our opportunities and our achievements superbly. So I just wanted to thank you for your leadership there. Thanks.
I agree. Final thing before we adjourn, just a reminder of the groundbreaking ceremony for Camp Stella on Friday at 10 a.m.
What time do you want us there, Ms. Banks?
9:30.
No later than a quarter to.
All right.
This will be outdoors, and
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of other groundbreaking ceremonies. I've never actually been to one. Are we going to be actually putting a shovel in, I mean,
Well,
Usually.
I mean, I just want to,
yeah,
know
yes, yeah, normally
what the-
line up with the hard hats
It'd
and,
be about 20
Okay.
shovels.
okay.
yeah.
Is it a high heel day, or is it a flat shoe
No, no.
day? That's really what I'm
Yeah,
getting
flat shoe day,
to.
flat shoe day. I'm not wearing my heels. Dr. Gabriel, I'm not wearing my heels. I'm going back.
Thank you.
Courtney, please.
But I will say, just to bring us back to a little bit more focus, it's a huge opportunity, though. I mean, this is a huge groundbreaking day in terms of Campus Stella. The fact is, it's our first of many schools,
Right.
and it's landmark in this city that we are embarking on such a construction effort. And Campus Stella being number one coming out of the chute, after all the work that's gone into it, I'm very happy for that community and for the city of Norfolk. I think it'll be fabulous.
I agree.
Okay. Well, our business is done for today. Thank you all very much. We stand adjourned.
Thank you.